Migration is one of the distinguishing features of human beings that has been occurring since it started from the very beginning of man's appear in this universe. Human mobility was even present in the primitive times, and people used to migrate in search of abundant food and in search of a safe living environment and protection from physical dangers. On completion of this module, you should be able to understand Wolpert's behavioral theory, and second, to understand the mobility field theory. In modern age, migration has gained importance with the ushering of the era of industrialization and urbanization. The factors like development of modern means of transport and communication, intermingling and interaction of different cultures, globalization, etc., has led thousands of people to migrate in search of better opportunities related to education, employment and living standard, among other factors. Migration is one of the causes of social change, and it is one of the three basic components of demographic change, the other two being birth and death. Migration is a complex phenomena affected by many factors, and attempts have been made from time to time to understand the various factors influencing the process. The place of in-migration or immigration is called the receiver population, and the place of out-migration or emigration is called the sender population. There are two basic types of migration studied by demographers. One, internal migration, refers to a change of residence within national boundaries, such as between states, provinces, cities or municipalities. An internal migrant is someone who moves to a different administrative territory. And second one, international migration, refers to change of residence over national boundaries. An international migrant is someone who moves to a different country. International migrants are further classified as legal immigrants, illegal immigrants and refugees. Legal immigrants are those who moved with the legal permission of the receiver nation. Illegal immigrants are those who moved without legal permission, and refugees are those crossed an international boundary to escape persecution. Weinstein, 𝗳𝗏 denote a third classification, which is called as forced migration. Forced migration exists when a person is moved against their will, for example, slaves, or when the move is initiated because of external factors such as natural disasters or civil war. The distinction between internal and international migration is crucial because they happen for different reasons. Because structural barriers are more likely to impede the mobility of a potential international migrant than an internal migrant. International migration involves more administrative procedures, greater expense and more difficulties associated with obtaining employment, accessing state services, learning a new language and the like. The motivations behind international migration are usually stronger than those behind internal migration. There are multiple perspectives and approaches to the study of migration, and a universally acceptable theory is yet to be developed that addresses the complex nature of the phenomena. There are several theories, but they appear to say only the same things in a diverse ways. A commonly held view is that migration is largely a movement of labor, and hence the discussion is dominated by economic theories. The demand for labor and its supply has a spatial characteristics and influenced by a set of push and pull factors, which are used to explain the migration process both at macro, that is aggregate, and micro, that is individual levels. However, a major fallacy in the argument is that what is true at the macro level may not be true at a micro level. Demand and supply conditions do not affect all individuals equally. There are multiple personal factors, that is economic, social, cultural and psychological, that are just as important. While ready availability of census data was the main motivation for the proliferation of aggregate studies, survey based data helped to examine the personal factors which were useful to highlight various migration differentials such as by occupation, income, education, race and more importantly by age. Although all aspects of human life, actions and outcomes are related, theories tend to emphasize and prioritize one factor over the others. Further, theories are also dominated by perspectives that are specific to the discipline of the study. It is because of these reasons that most theories are partial and incomplete. However, they are important because they are important to our understanding of the reality. Criticism of theory provide views that lie outside the assumptions and boundaries of the theories and equips us with a more holistic vision of reality. Thus, in our present discussions, we will briefly discuss behavioral theories of migration. Such theories emphasize the role of cognition and psychological factors in the migration process. Wolpert in 1965 made key contributions to the evolution of behavior based approaches to the study of migration. Till then, most attempts at model building focused on the variables and surrogates related to the ecological characteristics of the places exerting push and pull forces such as distance and inverting opportunities embedded in the demand and supply of labor. There was little understanding of how migration decisions are taken. The behavioral theories of migration stressed on psychological factors like perception of benefits and cost, stress and aspirations, which also vary by age, sex and education, which influence migration decisions and outcomes. They also highlight the shortcomings of existing theories, the gravity model, push-pull factors or structural theories that focus on wage differentials as primary determinants of migration. Behavioral theories, on the other hand, study how cognitive and decision making processes mediate between the socio-economic environment and the individual, which is unlike conventional theories that focused on aggregate analysis and differentials. Wolpert argued there are three important aspects of migration behavior. One, the notion of place utility, second, the life cycle approach and third, the field theory approach. We will briefly discuss each of these. One, the place utility. According to Wolpert, migration takes place when the place utility at some locations becomes greater than that of the present location. The concept of place utility is defined as the net composite of utilities which are derived from the individual's integration at some time and space and expressed as the individual's satisfaction or dissatisfaction with respect to that place. People migrate to a place that provides a high overall place utility than either the origin or an alternative destination. The behavioral approach also introduces the concept of stress. Thus, in the present location, an individual may put up with hardships or stress to a certain extent. When the stress crosses a limit, the individual will decide to migrate. It needs to be understood here that stress is a relative term and is closely related to aspirations. Most people have certain hopes and aspirations. Stress is the outcome of the effort to realize them. Wolpert was a geographer. He believed that place utility as assessed by potential migrants is the dominant factor in migration decision making. Place utility is very difficult to define because of the multiple risks involved in migration. It must also be mentioned here that place utility is more of an indicator of satisfaction rather than maximizing monetary benefits. Evaluation of cost and benefits of migration depends upon available information, which again is influenced by the density of social network. Wolpert argues that there exist spatial variations in the characteristics of people and places. This creates some places with a deficit of opportunities, while other places having a surplus of them. Decision making in migration is a cost benefit evaluation. The cost also include psychic cost as well as an opportunity cost. In microeconomics, opportunity cost is generally understood as a loss of potential gain from other alternatives when a certain alternative is chosen. It is an important part of decision making, which is in addition to the psychic cost, that is loss associated with separation from kin, friends and relatives. We can thus see that there are many components of cost and benefits whose evaluation is a complex process that varies with space and time. Behavioral theories are a modification of neoclassical theories of migration, according to which decisions are taken by the rational individual. On the other hand, new economics of migration emphasize that migration decisions are taken by families and households in order to avert risk and maximize household well-being through economic diversification. Risks are the product of the lack of credit and insurance market in the places of origin. Therefore, migration decisions are not only part of the psychological process of mental evaluation of cost and benefits of possible and alternative places of destination, but also household and family strategies that lie at the core migration decision making. Individuals reach a threshold level of net utility or aspiration level based on his or her imperfect knowledge and information. Utility assessment is a subjective process. The threshold functions as an evaluative mechanism for distinguishing between success and failure, positive and negative utilities and aspirations that motivate an individual to reach the attainable, while dissatisfaction acts as a stimulus to such behavior. All these aspects affect human behavior, including migration behavior. Wolpert in 1966 also added environmental stress as a spur for migration. This was an adjustment made in his subsequent studies. The life cycle approach indicates how birth, marriage, children, job, etc. affects the migration decision. As life cycle is closely related to age, migration is seen as an age selective process. However, while all people pass through the same life cycle stages, only a few migrate. Therefore, a stayer-mover distinction must be made within the life cycle approach to determine the stress and aspirations in migration decision making. Both stress and aspirations are interrelated. Higher level of aspirations may generate greater stress in the attempt to fulfill it. Further, stress and aspiration may be need or goal driven depending upon the economic status of potential migrants. Studies show that when the need of food and necessities are not satisfied, people resort to short duration and short distance migration. Since migration is a spatial behavior, there are several places that potential migrants know about whose utility will be assessed. The individual will tend to locate himself or herself at a place that possesses characteristics or promises a relatively higher level of place utility compared to the other places. The stayers are considered as laggard movers who postpone the decision to migrate for prolonged periods, which may extend to an entire lifetime. Thus, the mover-stayer dichotomy may be reduced to single dimension of time when to move. The migration flow is an outcome subject to place utility evaluation by individuals. Since a number of places may be involved in the evaluation, they form the action space or migration field. There is also an overlap with the information field and the social network of migrants through the spreads of kin, relatives and friends. The information field is changing rapidly in recent times, a result of the expansion of communication networks and information technology. Thus, the information field is no longer determined by personal channels alone and are not confined to social networks. This has important implications in shaping long distance migration, which was otherwise not possible. It must be re-emphasized that place utility or disutility is not simply the cost and benefit evaluation in the literal sense, but is a subjective evaluation which spans over the entire lifetime. Mobility field theory is a variation of behavioral theory. It is rooted in push factors, emphasizing stress as a dominant factor in influencing migration behavior. It was developed in the context of rural to urban migration and assumes that in developing countries, people move from a situation of rural unemployment to another situation of urban underemployment. Thus, migration is supposed to transfer rural poverty into an urban one, a result of spatial disorganization of the developmental process. This leads to urban decay rather than urban rejuvenation. Like Wolpert's model of behavioral theory, the concepts of need, stress and aspirations are central to the mobility field theory. Based on need, stress or aspiration, people take a decision to migrate within its mobility field, again based on utility and gain in different places. The idea of mobility field theory can be found in the work of Levin, which was later redeveloped by Rummel. The mobility field at the micro level is defined as a system which comprises the individual's needs and attributes, including stresses in the specific location, the perception of utilities of those discrete locations that define the individual's environment or life space, and the individual's different kinds of mobility behavior and their complex interrelationships. Migration behavior is an outcome of a change in the state of the field as a result of change in need stress conditions. The desire to satisfy specific needs and perception of specific utility, again in the places located in the mobility field, motivate an individual to migrate or move from his or her present location in the mobility field. Mukherjee, Wolpert and 𝗵𝗵𝗸 have also advocated the use of field theoretic or a system approach to the theory of migration, but they were unable to validate it with real data. Based on a sample size of 305 migrants from Varanasi city who made 436 moves, a data matrix was prepared for 3 domains, that is need attribute domain, place utility domain and mobility domain. In this theory, migration and mobility are undertaken mainly by the poor and disadvantaged sections in search of manual work. Migration is basically poverty driven and migrants' lot in cities improve as crowding and urban decay advances. The problem could be resolved through creation of jobs in rural areas and small towns close to the villages. The major contribution of mobility field theory is in the understanding of mobility within the framework of a system theory. It provides a holistic view of the interrelatedness of people and their needs and the utility consideration in the decision to move. However, the theory is deficient in that it does not take into consideration the positive aspects of migration through its contribution to poverty reduction and improvement of living conditions in rural areas. The behavioral theories also do not recognize migration that is influenced by globalization. The link between internal and international migration is missing in these theories, which emphasize only individual decision making and overlooks the role of family, the state and global forces in shaping migration behavior.